Okay, so today, guys, we're going to focus on what is this story really about? And what I mean by that, I want you to be bringing out the true meaning of the writing that you're trying to write about as you communicate to your readers what your story is actually going to be about. So let's look at what the experts do. If you're an expert, the single most effective way to make a piece of writing better is to write it once, then to think really hard about what you wrote the first time and to try it differently. Okay? In fact, some of the most famous writers rewrite more than once. Literally, many of them, it's dozens and dozens of times that they actually have to rewrite. And we are no different today. We're going to take one of our small moments and we're going to try and rewrite it so that we make it better, because that's always the goal. Because we're going to do that today. We're going to try that expert way. And one of the things that we're going to focus on with rewriting today is what students often forget. And that's what the main point is they're trying to communicate. This is a common mistake. It's one that I see from a lot of young writers, and that's what we're going to really try and tackle. So, when it comes to what the main point is, what you really have to ask yourself as a writer, what's my story really about? Okay? What's the main thing that I'm trying to say? Or what is my story really showing? Am I hitting it well or am I not? Right? Let's look at an example that I wrote. Oh, get out of there. Go on now, get, said Mrs. Taylor to the rabbits. It wasn't that Mrs. Taylor disliked rabbits. She just took great pride in her garden, and the rabbits were destroying her lush veggies and flowers. This was driving her crazy. While inspecting the latest round of destruction to her garden, Mrs. Taylor cried out, "Oh, my beautiful garden, it's just ruined." Mrs. Taylor's outcry startled something in her garden as the last remaining heads of lettuce shook back and forth. Mrs. Taylor was startled at first, but she knew this could be her last chance to finally confront one of those rabbits face to face. "Show yourself, you ornery rabbit," said Mrs. Taylor. Mrs. Taylor pushed the heads of lettuce to the side and was surprised to find a little skunk. "Oh no, not a skunk," she cried out. The skunk seemed instantly alarmed by her presence. Now, is that what I really wanted my story to be about? Because if you're looking at what I've written so far, it just seems like Mrs. Taylor is frustrated when she finds a skunk in her garden. And you're thinking this is going to be all about how the garden is getting ruined and how she's upset about it. But that's actually not what I want to show the reader. That's not what I'm really wanting them to get. What I really want them to see from this story is that Mrs. Taylor is more concerned about the injured skunk than her garden. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at, now that I know that I need to show that, what I would do differently to make sure that that message is coming through. So here's my new version. Now, it's going to be very similar at the beginning, okay, because I realize, okay, now I need to make sure I pivot and show what it is I want to show here. So watch how I change this. "Get out of there. Go on now, get," said Mrs. Taylor to the rabbits. It wasn't that Mrs. Taylor disliked rabbits. She just took great pride in her garden, and the rabbits were destroying her veggies and flowers. This was driving her crazy. While inspecting the latest round of destruction to her garden, Mrs. Taylor cried out, "Oh, my beautiful garden, it's just ruined." Mrs. Taylor's outcry startled something in her garden as the last remaining heads of lettuce shook back and forth. Mrs. Taylor was startled at first, but knew this could be her last chance to finally confront one of the rabbits face to face. "Show yourself, you ornery rabbit," said Mrs. Taylor. Mrs. Taylor pushed the heads of lettuce to the side and was surprised to find a little skunk. It was such a sad sight that Mrs. Taylor ignored the danger of getting sprayed by the little skunk. So notice right away, there's a change, right? It was such a sad sight that Mrs. Taylor ignored the danger of getting sprayed by the little skunk. "Oh no, not a skunk," she cried out. The skunk seemed instantly alarmed by her presence, but Mrs. Taylor's curiosity got the better of her when she noticed something seemed wrong with the animal. What's wrong with you? Why are you crying?" asked Mrs. Taylor. As she inspected the skunk, she noticed that its paw seemed to have a thorn in it. "Oh no," she cried out. "We must fix that immediately." As Mrs. Taylor got closer to the skunk, it started to lift its tail. Mrs. Taylor dodged the spray just in the nick of time. "Oh, can't you see I'm trying to help you?" she asked out loud. The skunk just kept moving slowly from the garden, and Mrs. Taylor wasn't sure what she could do to help. "If I get any closer, this skunk's going to spray me. What can I do to avoid this?" she thought. Suddenly, Mrs. Taylor's face lit up. "I got it," she exclaimed. "I know exactly what I need to do now. Tim, Tim, I need you to grab that suit we used last summer when we were cleaning that old abandoned house." "Hang on," Tim shouted from the house. After a few minutes, Tim, Mrs. Taylor's husband, came out from the house looking very concerned. He had a blue Cubs shirt on with shorts and wore sandals that didn't match. Mrs. Taylor didn't like that, but she was excited he was here so quickly. "Tim, this skunk—" "A skunk! Come on, let's get out of here," he interrupted. "No, Tim, I want to—" "Sarah, there's a skunk. Let's go." "Will you please listen to me? There's an injured skunk out here, and I want to grab the suit we used when we cleaned that abandoned house last month. You know, that gray one that I said made me look like I was going to space or something? I think it will stop the smell from the skunk if it sprays me." "Okay, but are you sure?" Tim asked. "Positive. That skunk needs my help." Notice that the details that I did this time, they're all about trying to show Mrs. Taylor's concern about the skunk, and that heavily outweighs how she felt about the garden. So notice that little difference that I ended up making in the previous slide here, right here where I say, it was such a sad sight that Mrs. Taylor ignored the danger of getting sprayed by the little skunk, because she went from being super annoyed to now she's completely changed to what she's doing, and it's all about helping that skunk get that thorn out of its paw. So that's definitely more on the right track now, because it's showing Mrs. Taylor's concern for the animal. Okay, and that's our main goal today. Today I want you to know that as writers, we need to rewrite and make sure that we're working with this question of, what is this story really about, as you start to write again? Because as you rewrite, that's what you're looking for. So how do you do that, right? Well, maybe you think up of a whole new way to tell the story. Now notice, I kept my story the same for the most part at the beginning, but I made sure to bring out different important details that emphasized what my meaning is for the audience, what I want my readers to really get from the story. Now, you could actually decide to start the story differently. So you could do it earlier or later in the day. Maybe that would capture what you're trying to say better. You could tell it out of order. Maybe you start with the end result, like a flash forward, and then you go back to telling what actually happened. You could also just make sure that you include different people in the story so that the meaning that you want to bring out is clearer. So notice in this situation, Tim, the husband, comes out in this story with Mrs. Taylor, and we see that he's worried about getting away from the skunk, but we see that she's so worried about the skunk that she's determined to stay right there despite what her husband is saying. So those are some strategies that you could use. So again, think, what is my story really about that you're rereading today? So that's the first step. You're going to reread one of your small moments that you've recently written about. Now think to yourself, what do you want to show? How are you going to do things differently? If you need to, plan it out. Make a little checklist for yourself of, okay, I think I want to make sure that for my beginning, I don't like that first paragraph. I need to be a little bit different in what I'm trying to say. Or maybe you're like me and you get to the end of what you've written so far and you're like, oh, I need to make a little tweak to one sentence, and I think that's going to help communicate what I'm saying to the reader better. Okay, so go back to your Google Doc, or if you're in a Pages document, go back to that. And then as you're rereading, thinking, what is my story really about? And then you need to make sure that you write in a way to where that meaning is really coming out to your reader. Okay, once you guys are finished, make sure that you take a screenshot and upload your document to me.